Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Vince Mayfield, who's an amazing founder of Talking Parents, co-founder and CEO. Talking Parents is software for co-parents, divorced or separated, or parents who are having a challenging time communicating and working together as co-parents. It's a software application that manages all the communication and coordination in a regulated way. Sometimes it's helpful in the court system, the legal system in any country. And other times it's just a useful documented way to track and manage the communication and minimize conflict between parents. It's actually a massive practical business, bootstrapped and headed towards 20 million in revenue with customers all over North America and 70 employees. And it's a great story from Vince Mayfield. Vince talks about the many ways he's learned to be the successful CEO of a scaling up businesses, surpassing $10 million and going to the next level. He got his MBA years ago. He's hired consultants. He's taken courses, and he's been a member of CEO peer groups in his neighborhood to be around other CEOs and founders to talk about the general questions and issues and growing a business. That's why I created the Practical Founders CEO peer groups. It's a professional peer group like EO or Vistage or YPO, but it's just for B2B SaaS founders who are practical founders doing it without big VC funding, who want to be around other founders like themselves to work on their hardest challenges every month. Right now, there are 35 serious B2B SaaS founders in 4 groups that I curate and moderate, and we meet every month. If you're interested in joining a Practical Founders peer group, go to practicalfounders.com, check out the CEO peer groups page, and apply, and we'll have a conversation to see if it's a great fit for you right now. Hey, Vince, welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir.
Sir, and you're wearing a jacket there. Are you still in Florida today, Vince?
Yeah, I'm in Florida,
Yeah.
Panhandle of Florida, what they call the Redneck Riviera. So
Yeah.
I'm a little overdressed for our area.
Yeah, I know. I thought that those kind of jackets were illegal there, but you're a business guy. And how long have you been out that way?
Well, I'm a military brat,
Oh.
so my dad got transplanted here in 1972 after we came back from Turkey. So I lived in Izmir, Turkey for a couple of years. And so I've lived here most of my life other than my time in the service. And I left for a period of time and while I was in college.
Wow. Well, it's beautiful there, and so beautiful it's attracted a bunch of people. It used to be quieter back in the old days, and now it's a very busy place on the beaches of the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, Northwest Florida. It's a nice area. So Destin, Fort Walton Beach.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I'm really curious about your software company and your story. It's an amazing story, and it's just proof that there are so many of these crazy stories you just almost wouldn't believe if you heard it. So, we're going to talk about your amazing success with Talking Parents. Let's just dive in with Talking Parents. It's the name of your company there. What is Talking Parents and who is it for?
Talking Parents is a family management platform and communication platform for people that are divorced, that are co-parenting, and it helps facilitate that communication and reduce the amount of conflict that's happening because all of the conversations, all of the communication goes through the platform. It's recorded. It's immutable. It can't change. So once you say it, once you do it, it is now there. So a couple things that we do all of the chat conversations that are back and forth. And then we also record phone calls and video calls and create a transcript, make them part of the record. Financial transactions that go back and forth between the parents, those are recorded and done. Calendars. And the idea is that, a lot of co-parenting relationships, when they go bad, they're high conflict. This is to try to reduce that conflict and make it more acrimonious because when people realize that their recordings and their things are being monitored and recorded, they tend to be a little nicer to each other. So what we're trying to do is make it a little bit better for people.
And is it more about the let's say, the compliance and the legal aspect? If you don't do this and you told me that, and I'll take you back to court, and this is useful in court? Or is it really facilitating, as you say, if you know somebody's watching, parents and co-parents in conflict, will be nicer to each other?
Well, it's a little both. I mean, it's about accountability. Not all of our people are court ordered.
Okay.
Some
Yeah.
are court ordered, but some actually choose it as a platform. Some of them,
Yeah.
a lot of younger folks, they may have been with somebody and fathered or mothered a child, but they can't stand each other,
Oh,
and they would rather compartmentalize their life through an app and keep that part of their life separate, right? Not have it done through Facebook or done through their chats on their phone and things like that. So it's compartmentalized in an app.
right. Well, I've never heard of an app like that. And I can imagine, people saying, well, that's an interesting niche, but there are millions of people in this situation right now. I don't know if there's tens of millions, but there's millions and millions of co parents in that kind of situation.
Yes, and it's not just a US issue, it's
Oh, yeah.
basically a worldwide issue, right? So there's other countries and stuff like that where this is a continual issue that people have to deal with.
Okay. Well, how big is Talking Parents right now? What can you say about revenues, customers, employees? It's a sizable company. I think people are going to be surprised.
Yeah, we crossed the 10 million in ARR threshold about 3 years or so back, and we're growing a pretty good clip, somewhere between 22 and 30% each year, slow but steady,
Yeah.
and being very deliberate about what we do and intentional about what we do and how we grow.
And how many employees in the business?
Right now, we're right around 65 are in the
Yeah.
business. So, and we're adding probably 6 or 8 more over the next 9 months.
It's an amazing business. Can you say that do you have thousands or tens of thousands of paying customers?
Well, we are in the realm of we've got over a 500,000 people
Oh,
that are registered and using the app, and roughly 100,000 that are paying customers.
well, that's amazing. And we're going to hear about the unique journey that you guys had to build this company. And you're running it as the CEO. You were a co-founder of the business on the technical side, and you had one of the founders in the business, a lawyer in this space who got it going. We'll talk about your journey there. So this is kind of a business that's over 10 million, headed to 20 or 30, right in that range. It's kind of where private equity shows up, and you haven't sold the company yet. I don't know if you're running it, but maybe with a PE playbook, the kind of things that make sense to you that private equity would do when they acquire a company at 10 million. But, where does this go from here?
Well, I mean, obviously, at some point we'd be interested in private equity, but we're feeling with our own cash, doing our own growth.
Right?
At some point, we do want to exit, but right now, we've got our own plans, and it's got to be the right time to take
Yeah.
private equity on. We're not in this to get rich quick. That's not the whole point.
Mhm.
The question is, what is PE bringing to the table? It's not just dollars.
Yeah.
Are they bringing something of value that's going to help me grow the company or take it to the next level? And so far, the things that are there, most of those things I can hire experts to come in and help
Yes.
me, or
Yes.
mentors that can help me without having to give up control of the company or have them take it in a different direction than what we want to go. So, we have our own plans and the things that we want to do. We've got our own playbook that we're doing. And that's not to say that I don't have mentors and advisors that are helping us out.
Yeah.
I'll mention that Eric Crowley from GP Bullhound has been a mentor and a friend for some time. And if I ever did go to market, he's probably the guy that I would
Oh,
likely
great.
go through.
Wow.
But he's been helpful and help because it's a focus on something that's unique. We're a consumer subscription business. We're B2C,
Yes.
so it's a very different model than say
Yeah.
a B2B SaaS play.
Yeah. I would say I'm trying to think of another one of the 150 founders I've interviewed, on the podcast that's actually a B2C kind of play, right? And it's not just a frivolous B2C app, a fun app or something like that. It's quite serious and long term and so forth. So it's quite a serious one. But you're right. It's selling to consumers, parents out there. You're not selling to lawyers and the legal system and the rest. You're selling directly to parents. Is there any outside funding in the business, or you guys, you know?
No,
Yeah,
it's all been self-funded bootstrap. But we've got an interesting story, as you know, in
yeah.
that, my original business partner, Lewis, and we actually started BitWizards, which was a custom software application company.
Like
And
a dev shop, build your application
yep,
way
dev
back when,
shop.
in like 2000.
Yeah,
The
25 years ago, it's
yeah.
still in business. It's
Okay.
pivoted multiple times.
Yeah.
But it's professional services, so you're
Yeah.
trading dollars for hours. And
Yes.
we tried a couple of times to try to find something because when you own a SaaS company or when you have software, you make money while you sleep, right?
Yeah.
But what we were doing was building other people's software, and we pretty successful. We did stuff for people like Dow Chemical and True Green Chemlon and folks like that. So as well as local small businesses and startups and things like that. So been successful to be there for 25 years, but we iterated that business and added on a marketing business into it because we
Mm,
started doing a lot of UI work.
yeah.
So we added that in, and then we added in an infrastructure business. And around 2012, we were operating out of the Bank of America building, and a guy named Stephen Nixon, who was a law attorney. Stephen had went to law school at FSU, and he had been a prosecutor and he'd been a defense attorney, and then he went into private practice with his brother. And his brother, Stephen was doing criminal law and business law, and his brother was doing family law. Well, his brother got tapped to be a magistrate. And when his brother got tapped to be a magistrate, Stephen had to take over the practice. And never having done family law, he went into his first court case, family law, and the judge was there, and people were handing each other, chats and,
Printed
from
out
text
copies of
messages
things.
and
Yes.
emails and all that nonsense. And finally, the judge said, pushed the stuff back over to both attorneys and said, "You guys go figure this out, put it in a readable form and bring it back to me, and I will make a ruling." And so Stephen walked out of that meeting saying, "Hey, there's got to be a better way." So he came up with this idea for talking parents, and he hired a guy working out of his house who was a developer, and threw him some money and asked him to build this app. And Stephen's original idea was to make money off of ad
Yeah.
revenue and make it free to the users.
Mhm.
And so he got this thing up and running, and then he got about 1,000 people on it. And then he realized, hey, this is operating on a server out of this guy's house. And sometimes I can't get in touch with him. And my reputation is on the line. So he happened to walk into the Bank of America building, saw BitWizards, and came upstairs and came to talk to Lewis and I and said, "Hey, I got this app. Can you take a look at it?" So he asked us to do a software evaluation of it. And I did the evaluation and I said, "Stephen," I said, "this thing was made with stone knives and bear skins.
Yes, right.
It's not made to scale, and it's not on a cloud platform." And so he says, "Well, what do you recommend?" I said, "Well, you're really going to have to rewrite it to scale. You're not going to have to,
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to patchwork this together." So Lewis and I decided to basically put $1 million of our own money out of BitWizards, hire Stephen, and made an offer to Stephen to come into the business and start a new company. And we did. We formed a new company called Monitored Communications LLC,
Mhm.
and doing business as Talking Parents. And Steven's job was to be the CEO, while BitWizards went back and rewrote the software.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what an amazing story. You're right that, somebody deep in a market, finds a painful problem and says, aha, let's work on this. And, he was a lawyer, not a software guy. And he proved something. He proved there was a there, right? The old MVP, scrappy, crappy first version that, got a lot of interest. And you were on the development side building products for these people, right? Through the years, among others, in big businesses. Did you quickly recognize this of like, oh my gosh, this guy's actually onto something. This could be an opportunity for us to jump across and be in the product business.
Well, we had tried a couple of things before that
Yeah.
never panned out. One of them was an actual physical product called Tailgater Carrier, which
Mm.
was a receiver that you plugged into the back that you could carry an ATV.
Ah,
And the guys asked us to be the exclusive online retailer. So we
okay.
invested in that and it didn't pan out. But
Yeah.
when I looked at the software and Lewis and I talked about because, being a custom software, you have a lot of people come and pitch, you know,
Yes. Yes.
ideas to you.
I'm very
And I
familiar.
love how they do it too, because it's kind of funny because they come and they say,
And
"Hey, I
it
got this
definitely worked.
idea
Yeah.
and we want you to build this for us, right? I'm going to cut you in for 10%, but you're going to do it for free." And, my answers
Classic.
always be, "Okay, great. What are you bringing to the table?" "Well, I'm bringing the idea." And I'm like, "Well, can you execute on it? Can you build the software? I think you have those numbers backwards. It should be 90% to us and 10% to you." But
Yeah.
Steven had already had a proofed out idea and we had
Yeah.
been looking for something and we just thought it was just a novel idea
Yeah.
in a market that was relatively untapped with no competitors
Open
at the
field.
time
Yeah.
and said, "Steven, we think this is a great idea. We're willing to put some of our money into this to do this, utilize BitWizards to build the software. We know how to build software and build software that scales. And what do you think?" And so it just kind of was one of those things that we recognized after having seen a lot of different people pitch things to us, look at a lot of corporate software. And and if you got to think about this is 2012. It's a few years after the iPhone has come out,
Yeah.
mobile apps are making a play.
Yeah.
We've been through the dot-com bust back in the 2000s. And so, we're trying to find something that we can do where we're not trading dollars for hours. And this was one of those things that it was proof and it was there. And Stephen had a great idea. And we thought, okay, we can take this and rebuild this and get it going.
And it wasn't just this one-time project. You was an ongoing relationship where the BitWizards team was continually building and advancing the Talking Parents product. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We
Yeah.
basically rebuilt the entire thing from scratch. And as I mentioned before, we brought in a digital marketing company. We
Yeah.
bought that company and
Yeah.
integrated it into BitWizards. And so we started to do a lot more professional marketing. Stephen had these kind of lawyery brochures that he would send
Right.
out,
Uh-huh.
and we basically redid those and sort of put that professional look and feel, not just to the app, but to the marketing and the approach that we did. And we sent him out all over the country to meet with lawyers and judges and kind of get the word out there.
And he was the face and the expert and the lawyer, right, in the
He
middle
was
of
the
this.
face, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things that's tough about this particular market is because judges and attorneys and clerks of court, they don't want to talk to lay people. They want to talk to people that are in their realm. And so Stephen was the right guy to kind of put that
Yes.
face out there.
Right. You recognize that one as well. He could carry the flag for a long time.
Absolutely.
Vince, can I ask you, like, you put $1 million into this business and rewrite it. Was it an arm's length relationship with your services company to the monitored communications company that was Talking Parents? That $1 million went into the business and then went back to BitWizards, and then they paid BitWizards out of revenue for R&D like an outsourced provider? Or
Nah, well, we set it up like an outsourced provider with a contract and everything, but basically Bitwizards was footing the bill to make this happen. We were taking out of the profits at Bitwizards and it was owed back to Bitwizards. And we did it at a discounted rate. So,
okay.
we paid for all the fees and the cost and everything else. So really at the time, there was really only one employee, which was Steven
Yeah.
initially.
Yeah, and you're getting this thing going, and who knows where it's gonna
Yeah.
go and so forth, and you finally get it up, and the more you invested, I guess the more piece of the business you got, or there was a little bit of a
No,
liability, like
the
yeah,
way we did it was we busted it up. It was 33%
yeah,
each between the three of us. And
yeah,
then, it was mine and Lewis's job to resolve the issue with Bitwizards. Talking Parents owed that money back to Bitwizards and
I
then
see.
it's paid that money back since then.
Okay. Alright, that's great. So, did you have a sense this was gonna go? I mean, it was already moving, but you're like, "Wow, it's already moving, I could just jump on this thing," or was it so early that you didn't know if it was gonna work?
We didn't know. I mean,
Ah,
we thought it was a great idea. And Steven certainly was passionate about it.
yes, I'm
And,
sure he was
it could
persuasive. Yeah.
could sell it. I mean, he didn't ask us to do this. This was something that we came back and proposed back to him after doing
Yeah.
the software evaluation because he didn't have the money to
Yeah.
pay, custom software rates to rebuild the app and do the things that needed to be done. So this is a way that it could be a win-win for us and a win-win for him. And it just so happened that we all brought something to the table that was beneficial, that would allow us to propel this company forward.
Yeah. And, with you and Lewis, what were the roles there? Was one of you product engineering and another one was, building out the operations and marketing of the business or something?
So, Steven's job was to be the face of the company and to go out and do that. But from the other side, I was the CEO of BitWizards. Lewis was the operations guy. I did a lot of the, setting up of the books and things like
I see.
that. That's my, one of my areas and a little bit of the engineering. I do a lot
Yeah.
of engineering just like Lewis does. We're both software engineers.
Yeah, right.
So software engineers that learn to run a business. So
Yeah. Well, I always say it's way easier for a software engineer to figure out how to run a business and lead a larger team than it is for a business person to go figure out how to write software,
well, that's
right?
true, but I tell you, we actually had to have an epiphany. We got to the point where we realized in BitWizards that we sort of owned a hobby, right? And
Mhm.
we
The
had a
services
significant amount
business.
of
Yeah.
people. We had 40 people at the time that we got Steven on board. But I realized that if I wanted did I want to own a business or did I want to own a hobby? And we made the Inc. 5000 list at BitWizards. It was our first year in '09. And we made a pivot then and just decided, hey, I've got to get out of writing software every day. I've got to make a pivot. I ended up going back to business school. I went to Notre Dame and got my MBA.
Oh, wow.
And so there were a number of changes that we made to think differently and to get out and work on our business, put the systems and processes that were in place that were necessary to have something of transferable value.
Yeah.
And so, both with Talking Parents and BitWizards, this has been our focus on building in a solid way so that if we ever did go to private equity or we were ready to sell, somebody had something that would operate without the two of us having to be
There you
there.
go. Great. And was that MBA useful, let's say 10 years ago? There wasn't much going on about quote entrepreneurship and all this SaaS or private equity playbook stuff that was going on. Was it just useful to learn the business side of the game and financials and all of that you didn't understand?
Yeah, I mean, we had done some of that. I went to the Small Business Development Center at
Yes.
University of West Florida to learn basic bookkeeping and some of those types of things. But the MBA was a pivot point for
Eh,
me, especially because it was a Notre Dame MBA. I got to work with other people that were out in the business world. I got to understand how they operated in the corporate world. It's kind of funny. I was kind of at a crisis at that point. I
eh,
wasn't sure if I wanted to continue forward as an entrepreneur. And I applied to the program and got in, and I showed up and I thought, holy cow, I mean, how did I get in here?
yeah, you're down here and everybody's up
And
here.
and
Yeah.
we got guys that are like the CFO at Campbell's, and I've got a guy
Wow.
that's a surgeon, and all these people in the program. But what I realized really quick is that they all wanted to be me. Right? They were doing corporate jobs and stuff like that, and I learned so much from those folks, different business models and things like that, and that's
There
what
you
was good about the
go. Okay.
custom software realm is I learned about a lot of
There
businesses
you go.
and models and how they worked and was able to take that and apply it, which has allowed us to help us build out both BitWizards and Talking Parents.
So you met Steve and he had this scrappy thing that was starting to move. You decided to rewrite it. What else changed there? Did you change pricing and get a real website and, get the real SaaS model in order? Or how did you get up to, your first million of revenue, which I'm sure was a feat?
Yeah, the first few years, we didn't make any money, barely made any money at all, barely
Yes.
enough to even cover Steven's salary,
Uh,
because we were operating on ad revenue, right?
right.
And, ad revenue is the
Free
least
product, get
dependable
the
way.
eyeballs, make money
Yeah,
on ads, right?
yeah. So it was, you know, you're not making any money. And I remember there was an epiphany right after, we were having some tough times both at BitWizards and Talking Parents. And I remember the room, because Steven's kind of, as an attorney, attorneys tend to be a little more risk adverse, right? Whereas, Lewis and I have been running a company for a while. We're software engineers, damn the
Let's
torpedoes,
go.
full
Yeah.
speed ahead. We can make anything happen type of thing. And I remember the conversation where we're sitting in the room and I said, Steven, I said, everybody in that courtroom is making money but us. And I said, ad revenue is not going to cut it. We have to get on a subscription model. We have to monetize. We have to do something different. And Steven listened and he got on board. And so we decided to start making mobile apps. At the time, the app was just a web app, right? And
Yeah.
you could run it on a desktop. It wasn't even mobile responsive. And so in 2015, 2016 timeframe, we went out and built a mobile app on iOS. We actually built it on Xamarin on
Yeah.
Microsoft's platform because we were a Microsoft shop. And once we did that, that changed everything. First year, around $150,000, which was more money than we had made over the preceding 4 years combined. And then it just took off from there. So we started focusing on adding more features and functions and listening to what the users wanted
Yeah.
and really build it out. So pivoting and actually monetizing was a big deal for us. That's where things really took off
And
and
you
really
charged a per parent fee or a per family
it was a
fee?
per month fee.
Yeah.
So each parent paid per month, and then and that's not to say that the free users didn't pay us anything. When you go to court and you need a record, you buy a copy of the record.
I see.
But they were all everything was way underpriced. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
enough to cover the cost. And so we learned really quickly, well, I won't say really quickly, it took us a few years to figure it out that, ad revenue wasn't going to cut it and we needed to be different. But once we changed to a subscription model, a monthly subscription model, that changed everything.
It's an important practical founder's story here. You didn't say we have an idea, we need outside funding to do this. You put in funding from the business that you had created, you and Lewis, and you put in your time and energy and I guess resource there too for a few years while this thing was not making money. Would you say that Stephen survived by being a lawyer? Is there during that time as well, or and you survived on your services company to get across that, investment?
No,
Yep.
I would say
Okay.
that so Stephen basically left his job,
Oh, okay.
his private practice and his job at the prosecutor's office. He left both of those things
Yeah.
and went to come work for us because the idea is that we needed to operate bigger than we were.
Yeah.
We needed to make a full court press to get it going forward. And so we paid Stephen's salary for those first,
Okay.
several years. And Lewis and I just basically, along with Steven, basically worked our butts off.
Yeah.
You're talking, 60 plus hours or
Yes.
more a week. And, at the time, I wasn't married and didn't have any kids. And, Lewis wasn't married or Lewis was married, but he didn't have any children. And so it was, it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Great. When did you feel like this is moving? Like new customers are coming in, they're paying. You could see that you were covering expenses, right? Was that about $1 million in revenue and or
Yeah,
something like
we
that?
quickly shot up from, basically 100. I think the first year was once we after we monetized was around 170 grand for the year, 180 grand for the year. But then the next year, it was four times that. I think it was close to just under $1 million, and the
Wow.
year after that was almost 2 million. So
Wow.
it just sort of took off. I think, I don't ever feel like we've arrived.
Yeah.
I always feel like we're pivoting to the next level,
Yeah.
right? The next new things that we need to
Yeah, there
do
you
to
go.
take the business. Because the business you are when you're, five people and, $100,000 in revenue, and the business that you are with 40 people and 5 million in revenue
Yeah.
or 10
Totally
million in
different.
revenue, it's a different business, right? So
Mhm.
you're constantly having to reinvent yourself and do something different, right? Because the needs of the business are different.
Yeah.
So it's like having a toddler or a child
Yeah.
all the time that you've got to kind of and it endlessly needs from you.
That's right. Yes, always yelling at you about something they need there. And so you guys were off like a rocket, tripling and then doubling and in real revenues. Can you look back and say, we priced it right and people were, happy to pay for something so important to them?
I would say hell no.
Yeah.
I mean, we made a lot of mistakes. We underpriced in the beginning. Now, I
Yeah,
remember there was a lot of discussion, wailing and gnashing of teeth
I'm
between all
sure.
of us, afraid to lose customers by raising prices, not pricing it right the first time.
Yeah.
I really say that the pivotal point, most of that was done by gut feel and trial and error. And every time we were afraid to do something, when we took the risk and did it, it paid off, right? But it wasn't until we were able to instrumentate in the application and really understand what the users were doing and started surveying our customers to get feedback that we really understood the mind of the customer and where some of those thresholds were. And I'm not saying that we're clairvoyant and that we know, but we were able to trial and find things out. Before that, it was all done by gut feel.
Mhm.
We knew customers needed it. We knew they wanted it. And it was surprising to us. We thought that the courts were our customer. And one of my
Uh,
instructors at Notre Dame,
yeah.
Dr. Chuck Bamford, said, Vince, he said, the person that is your customer is the person that gives you money for the service. That's the person that you need to be focused on.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, those others may be influencers. They may be people that, will help you, but you need to listen to the voice of that customer. So we became radically focused on what the customer had to say, what kind of feedback. And that's not to say nobody wants to pay more for something.
Yeah.
But you figure out, what are their needs? What are the things, the features and functions that they want in the application? And what are they willing to pay for? And what are they not willing to pay for? And we made a lot of mistakes. We did
Yeah.
a lot of dumb stuff.
Yeah, yeah. In the B2C land, you're not talking to a corporate buyer or a small business owner that has kind of an economic math in their head, among other things. Did you get on the phone and talk to these parents, or did you do, surveys and ask them questions? How did you, uncover what was really important to them, how they perceived your app and
Yeah,
all
we
that?
started with, sending out surveys, asking questions, getting feedback from support,
Yes.
those types of things. We've got a really good feedback loop with support now, but it took us a while to develop those things because you
Well,
can't put all those systems and processes in place at once, right?
yeah.
So you try one thing. It started with something simple like surveying the customers. You weed out the people that are just not nice or ticked off about their situation that you have no control over, and you really look to try to dig in. But then we got to the point where we were found people that were champions, and we started getting on the phone with them and
There
asking
you go.
questions, or people that would call into support and say, "Hey, I love your app." And we were like, "Oh, great. Well, tell me about it.
Yeah.
What do you love about it, right? What would you like to see in it?" We started doing things like that. Then we started creating focus groups. So
Mm,
it was an iterative process of
yeah.
things that we did over time as we had more money and more ability to do those things. And we listened to mentors and people out there in the business and asked, "What are you guys doing? How are you doing this? How are you getting this information?"
Yeah. That's really important. And, it's hard to iterate on 5 customers and, a digital app where people aren't spending a lot of time on it and you don't get a lot of data and they don't want to talk to you and so forth. But you had done the hard work through intuition and all that scrappy to start to instrumentate and, be a little bit more rigorous about it and get a little bit more statistical about it. You could get better data around that. At what point were you, let's say, I don't know if you could say profitable. Did you turn into a profitable company paying Steven and developers and I don't know, support and the rest, like around 1
We
million
were
or 2 million?
profitable and we were profitable in year 2. Once we
There
monetized,
you
we were
go.
profitable in year 2.
Okay.
So, that was the whole point was, getting people to pay for the service and get it monetized properly. That's when we got profitable.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, Lewis and I had already been running a professional services business. It was just a different set of economics
Yes.
with SaaS. And
Yeah.
so, we had to learn what those economics were and understand how to do this. But, managing a P&L, managing a balance sheet, those
Cash and
things,
the whole thing. Yeah.
they're a little bit different, but, you figure out how does this business work and what levers do you pull to do certain things.
Right. This podcast is brought to you by my friends at Fraction. Are you stuck at your seven-figure ARR with tech challenges holding you back? Whether it's tech debt, slow feature delivery, or other scaling challenges, you're not alone. Every founder hits this wall. That's where Fraction comes in. Fraction gives you access to senior US-based engineers and CTOs without full-time costs or hiring risks. Fraction founder Praveen Ganta is a practical founder himself who has been on this podcast. He grew his bootstrapped SaaS business, Hidden Levers, with fractional talent and sold it for more than $100 million. Fraction's experts come in to fix problems and do real work, not just give advice. Fraction is flexible and founder-friendly. Get 10 to 30 hours per week from vetted and experienced US-based talent. And you could start with 1 week risk-free trial to test it out. Find your next fractional senior engineer or CTO at fraction.work. Now back to our podcast. Yeah, it's a different sport, I say. Like, there's mechanics of professional services organizations and profitability and the software and SaaS product-based, recurring revenue business and all of that. It's not rocket science. It's just different. And a lot of services entrepreneurs don't make it over to SaaS. They don't learn the new sport. Or the new habits you have to have with product, which, there's a little different game. The product game is different than the services game.
It is. And I think it goes back to one of our core values, which is, about growing and evolving. And at BitWizards, it's being a lifelong learner. We were always curious. We were always learning. We were always going to seminars and looking to experts and reading and, constantly trying to evolve our game to get better at it and to, get better results out of it. When you're an entrepreneur, you kind of thrive off of creating something and kind of being the master of your own destiny. And, along with that comes most entrepreneurs that I know are lifelong learners and they are constantly evolving. And once you sort of learn how things are done, that's not to say there's not challenges with a product or, a new model or something like that. It's getting in, digging in and understanding it. And I think that people that really thrive on this they can build multiple businesses,
Yes.
right? You figure out how to do it. It's all a matter of resources and it's a matter of time and effort to make it happen.
That's right. How long did it take you to understand the deeper SaaS metrics and SaaS financials, which is different than professional services, and what's really going on and where the leverage is there? How did you do that?
Like I said, I spent a lot of time and in effort in doing seminars and things like that. But I came across some people that were sort of voices in the community. One of them was Ben Murray, the SaaS CFO. Sure.
Yeah.
And I saw his online thing about understanding, SaaS metrics and how do they work. And so I went online and took his course.
Oh, great.
And then from that, I'm also in Vistage, which is a CEO peer group.
Right.
And so I have a lot of mentors there that helped out. But with the SaaS metrics, it was really Ben Murray and his course that I went through, which got me curious. And I started reading other people's stuff, which also led me to meet, Eric Crowley from GP Bullhound and then the folks over at Revenue Cat. And so I started to learn about all these things from all these different folks out there. I started, going on the web and reading and stuff like that. And then ultimately what I did was I actually hired Ben Ben Murray as a fractional CFO. And said, hey, I'm not big enough to have a CFO, but I need somebody to help me with getting these numbers in place and help me understand and interpret them better and let me learn from you who's done it. And I think for Ben, it was a good deal because he had primarily been B2B. And while the metrics are similar, the ACV and those types of things, they're different, when you're in a business to consumer model. And so he helped me understand those things and continues to work with us today.
That's great. I love Ben. He's been on the podcast. He helps out a lot of SaaS founders who are smart, but they're not new to the sport, and he teaches them the sport. And, they're good athletes already. What is your ACV, average contract value? What does a parent pay you in a year or a
A
month?
parent pays us about $17. It's about $17 a month. But in a year, you multiply that because we're month to month. We just recently put in place annual contracts.
Mhm.
So that's another thing that we expanded to. So we have monthly and we have annual, but we found that one of the things that customers like about this is they like to have the control of
Yeah.
it being month to month. So we've got different levels. It's $27 for the ultimate version, and then we have an essentials, which is like $12, and then we've got a basic version, which is 6, and then we've got a free.
Okay. Well, one of the problems of the B2C game and their lower monthly price points is, oh my God, you need 10 times, 100 times more customers to make the same amount of total revenue. How did you get so many customers on your platform? What was the go to market, the marketing and sales? How did this spread? And, you know, was
Well,
it online
initially it
ads or,
Well,
lawyers
initially
recommending?
it was
Yeah,
people that were court ordered and going in. That was one avenue, going to the lawyers and the clerks of court and sending out, brochures and things like that to them because a lot of the people in the legal community want something physical in their hand.
I see.
But later on, it became more about being radically focused on that customer that I was talking about and getting information from them and surveying them, finding out what features and functions did they want, which, we started creating an online community and being radically focused on, what did they want? What were their needs and solving their problems? We build a lot of content now that we don't charge anything for, but
Mhm.
it adds to the value of our service. We've engaged a lot of influencers,
Okay.
which is another way. So people that are out there that are involved in the co-parenting community. That's not to say that we still don't target the courts and we don't go out and talk to the court systems and folks like that. The courts don't want, there's a couple of other competitors that we have now.
Oh,
The courts they don't want to pick a favorite,
yeah.
so they let people choose between them. And so what we do is just be radically focused on that customer and what are their needs and what do they want and what's important to them.
Yeah. I mean, is there a legal community? Maybe this was Stephen in the beginning going to individual courts and knocking on the doors with brochures and saying, hey, we have this thing and it would be really useful and you ought to recommend it. Here's some brochures and then conferences and, trade shows or whatever legal trade shows is, did that, what were the kind of mechanics there? Was it,
Well, that was exactly how it was
okay.
done in the beginning. You spelled it out. So in the beginning, it was basically Stephen traveling all over the country to
Mhm.
different clerks of court, people that had reached out or had heard. It was mostly word of mouth between the court systems and the fact that he was an attorney, he could get
Yes.
in the door to talk to a
Yes.
judge or he could talk to a clerk of court. That's not scalable. And
Yes, of course.
part of the thing with that is that, we actually entertain going out and hiring a bunch of attorneys as sort of
Hmm.
part-time type
Yeah.
of deal and
Right.
add on to their practice. But the problem is that if you with that is that you want to represent your company a certain way, right? You need
Hmm.
ambassadors. You
Hmm.
need people that when people hear about your company and they think about your company, they're endeared to your company, right?
Yeah.
And so if somebody's job is to be an attorney and this is just sort of a part-time gig, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and it's very expensive to kind of get that to make it lucrative enough for them to want to do it as a
Yeah.
side gig.
Yeah.
And I never thought that it was like a professional services sale
Oh.
to the courts. They're more influencers. And so we went a different route. We did digital
Oh.
marketing.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
And so
right.
we went straight to the customer. So, we did Google ads, we did Apple ads. When we got on the Android, all- that platform, we focused on that instrumentation that I talked about,
Mhm.
surveying the customers. We very strategically chose who we might have for potential ambassadors or influencers
Yep.
in the community.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure it was people that were going to represent us well. And so that's kind of how we did it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
it was really focused on the customer and, doing that digital marketing play, looking at what was working and what wasn't, and then changing it based upon the data.
Mhm.
So we were making sure that when we spent money, we weren't just throwing money
Yeah.
away, that it was actually getting us a return. And that's hard in the beginning if you don't have your full funnel mapped out
Yeah.
and you can't track the whole customer
Yeah.
life cycle. So it took us a while to get to that point.
And that was, among other things, attributing a Facebook ad to a visit to the website to a purchase or something like that, so you could
Yeah,
see
and
what, or, SEO content or something.
exactly. And then, the other side of it is that our sign up is complicated because you have to have two parents that want to use this thing together. So it's not just driving one person, it's driving one
Complicated.
person, then getting the other person to be willing to participate because you have to match the two people together.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
Wow.
We tried to build that process in where it was automated and that we could make sure that we knew who our customers were, know who your customer is. And those are things that we learned over time, that matching and getting them together and doing it. And there are some customers, one of the things that that we've been working on is trying to get to a single user mode where we can track this communication where you don't have two people
Uh-huh.
cooperating, right? And so that's another thing that we're trying to do, but while preserving the record and preserving the accountability that we want built into the app. So
Okay.
everything that we build into the app is about it being accountable, accountable payments, accountable calling, accountable, communications is what we want. That's the whole thrust of it so that it's part of the record. And that if somebody does have to go back into court, we reduce the amount of conflict that's there and get people to, be more civil to each other, make their lives better, let them focus on their kids, right?
Yeah.
That's what's important. You
Yeah.
created a human life between the two of you,
Yeah.
right?
That's amazing. Is that world, it's almost a vertical in B2C, right? Co-parenting. Is it called co-parenting? And everybody who's going through this, they gather together in Facebook groups and they're using the same terms and, therapists
Outside,
and, help, or is there a bunch of sub, content areas?
there's some, I would say in the Apple App Store, it's not,
Yeah.
we're considered productivity. If you go into Google, they actually have a co-parenting and,
There you go.
a family management area. But out in the community, it's co-parenting, it's
Okay.
high conflict,
Yeah.
divorce, high conflict,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Right. And what they could do, normal phone calls, texts, whatever, emails, is drastically different to the courts and to the parents, right? It's not just the courts saying you need to do this. The parents are saying this would be better if we did this. Like there's multiple sides here that have to choose this alternative to how we normally communicate.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's a single source of truth, right? What we
Right.
do is we create that record, we bring everything back together into one communication platform versus, well, this person's using Facebook Messenger and this person's using, text messages and I didn't get the text message and I didn't get the email and this one's on Gmail and this one's on Google. And, if they're managing it all through the app, there's a level of accountability there and you can put some checks in place. So to give you an
Yeah.
example, like calendars, right? If I tell parents that are in co-parenting situations sometimes mess with each other, right? So pick little Johnny up at 5 o'clock when you were supposed to be there at 4. They didn't say the truth, right? Well, if it's done through the app, now we know. And then if you're doing stuff like, hey, be there at 5, we'll now be there at 4, we'll now be there at 3. It's all in the app, those changes. If the
Yeah.
person's being difficult, it's readily, there and it's recorded as part of the transcript in the record that ends up going back if you need to go back to court.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's a little different than a normal B2C app, something people would play with and not stick around. Churn is a very problematic thing in B2C apps and monetization, but presumably after they get two parents get the co-parents get the hang of this, they're going to stick around for, I guess, years, right?
Yeah, I mean the churn is low. Obviously B2C apps have higher churn rates
Yes.
across the
Uh-huh.
board, right? And we're not an entertainment app.
Right.
It fulfills a specific need. So those things they tend to be more sticky.
Hmm.
There's some other competitors out there, and we make sure that we differentiate between them. one started up as a family management platform and really wasn't a communication platform like what we do. It didn't create a record. And then they sort of followed what we were doing and have now bolted that on. And now all of them are kind of trying to do that.
I see.
So, it is what it is. We've got to constantly iterate and, we've got our plans and things that we're doing. And what we want to do is provide that value to our customers.
You've got almost 70 employees now. Is this a, you know, uh, mostly product marketing, a little bit of sales and support because you're not really talking to customers at that price point, a little bit of operations? Is that generally how your operations look? It's not very sales heavy, right, for this kind
Nope.
of price point.
It's marketing heavy, it's R&D and
There you go.
development heavy,
Yeah.
and of course, operations. We pride ourselves on, all of our employees, we're different, right? So I don't have a bunch of subcontractors. So we
Yeah.
don't use subcontractors. We're all W-2.
Ah.
We are all here in the same building. I've got a
Oh,
couple of remote employees, so it kind of bucks the model. I sort of feel like that, in this type of thing, people tend to be more creative when they're able to interact with each other, where you've got that constant feedback between marketing and UI UX and dev, so that we get the best product out there to our customers.
has that been a challenge for you? You're not in a big city, big metro area, right? To build a software company. I don't know how many other software companies are based in the Fort Walton Beach area, but has that been a challenge? I know it's a priority for you, but to get 65 employees that are focused on your mission, in a smaller community.
I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah.
we live on the sugar white sand beaches of the
Yes.
Gulf of
Okay.
Mexico. It's a great place to live. It's a lower cost of living. It's a great place to raise a family. Occasionally we do. We get people that, they come from the Silicon Valley area
Ah,
and they
okay.
want, a percentage of the pie, and they have salaries that are far outside what we would pay. But, we've got a great work environment where people enjoy coming to work. They enjoy working with each other,
Mhm.
and they're all, well versed in the mission and want to do great things for our customers. And so, it can be challenging sometimes for certain skill sets, but in general, I think people, when they hear about the app, they see the environment they're in, they understand that, we've been a Florida Trend, BitWizards was a Florida Trend magazine, is a Florida Trend magazine's best places to work 16 years in a row. We've been in Inc. 9 years in a row. Talking Parents has now been a best places to work 2 years in a row for both of those different platforms. And so we're very highly focused on the
Yeah.
people that work for us and make it a great work environment where they can raise their families and they can do cool work and do great things in a great place to live.
That's awesome. And I'm just thinking about your story headed towards 20 million, well above 10 million and growing steadily despite competition, focusing in the evolution of the product, right? From a few little features here to, pretty rich application with more, things you could build on it. The business model has transformed and evolved. Your understanding of the SaaS model and pricing and mechanics and churn and measurement and tracking, understanding your users, um, and building an organization. A 10-person team is not the same as a 70-person team. Like, which of those, you guys have evolved since 2012, then 2015, 16, so 10 plus years. Which of those, I guess, maturities and evolutions has been most difficult in the business? It seems like everything is improved, but what do you think was most challenging for you as CEO?
Well, the early stages were the hardest because you've got to make more of limited resources,
Eh,
right? And you have to make more judicious decisions while still being willing to take risk in the beginning,
yeah,
right? Risk that doesn't kill you. Lewis will tell you we made more good decisions than we made bad decisions.
yeah,
And so, but we learned from mistakes really quickly,
mhm,
and if we did get in trouble, we weren't afraid to reach out for help, to talk to mentors,
mhm.
or if we, got into financial trouble, we made sure that we talked to any creditors or things like that we had, and we always made sure that we were never way overextended. And I will also tell you that during those years, there was a lot of delayed gratification for ourselves.
A lot of
I
sacrifice. Yeah.
yeah, there was just a lot of delay, sacrifice, and delayed gratification. I mean, we had, in BitWizards, you know, I went from having, at this time, you're talking 2000, having an $80,000 a year salary to 1 year having $5,000 and living off of my credit cards for an entire year.
Mhm.
There's been periods where we hired people that made more money than we made, right?
Mhm.
And when you make a profit, you reinvest it back in the business.
Mhm.
And each stage it gets challenging. The potential for mistakes are bigger, right? And the ramifications of those mistakes or
That's correct.
missteps are bigger, right?
Right.
So to give you an example, we made some choices with some software that we integrated into the application that, later on that company couldn't scale with us. And it was a part of a major feature that we had. And so we had to retool and re-instrument, in a short period of time. It was a lot of money. It was costly, and it was money that we could have spent on building new features rather than retrofitting.
Mhm.
We did some things in the beginning that we didn't take care of, some technical debt that we had that we should have taken care of, right? As a developer, it's kind of
Yeah.
you patch it together and limp it along. But then those things end up in a situation where you can't scale the way you need to scale, or you can't iterate where you need to iterate, and you've
Mm.
got to do them. So I would say that the early startup stages, the first, till we got into probably the $4 or $5 million realm, those were all the time before that were the toughest times. That's not to say that there's not tough times now. There are different challenges and different problems. Both Lewis and Steven have gone into founder roles now, and so I run both companies still. And
So
but
they're
what
not
I've
operating in the business.
no,
Okay.
no. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, they take, money out of the business and a
Yeah.
salary and that type of thing,
Yeah.
but, they're not operating day to day. What I had to do was to go find leaders in the company.
There you
I
go.
had to put directors in place, and then I had to mentor and grow those directors,
There you
and
go.
we're even evolving beyond that. You go from director level, now you're starting to look at, do I need, C-levels? Do I need
Yeah.
CFO? Do I need a CMO? How do those work? Do I hire in, or do I mentor somebody that's come up through? Do they have the capacity and capability? One of the things that I do now that's very critical to our success is I have weekly one-on-ones with all of my directors, and all of my directors have one-on-ones with their managers. And,
Yeah.
this is the way that we facilitate the communication. We model the behaviors that we want and get them to grow and bring them to the next level. And for things that I can't mentor them on, so for example, my director of marketing, I have a CMO that is actually mentoring her and
Oh,
bringing
great.
her
Yeah.
to the
Makes
next
sense.
level,
Yeah.
just like I have in Vistage. And that's a something that I learned out of Vistage. Again, the company you are when you have 5,000 people, or when you have 5 million in revenue and, maybe 40 people, is not the same company you are when you've got, 20 million in revenue and say, 80 people.
Yeah.
It's not. You've got to iterate and change. And you've got to have the stamina for that. You've got to be willing to put in the
To go
effort
through that
and do
change,
that.
right? To do the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no shortcuts to this. I love it when
Mhm.
people tell me I've got an idea and I'm going to start up and it's going to go viral overnight. And my first thought is bullshit. It's not going to happen that way, right? It's much harder than everybody thinks. You hear about the overnight success, but what you don't see is the 10-year grind that it took to get
Right.
there, right? And the sacrifice and delayed gratification that goes along. So,
And the bets, to make, and the
yes.
pricing and the people and the market and so forth. Yeah. Vince, was it a challenge for Stephen to step out of a role? Sometimes that spokesperson, face of the company is challenged, when they get tired of it or the business model changes and they're not as useful. Was that a difficult transition, or had you he was the person who spread the word in the beginning, hand-to-hand combat, but your digital marketing took over and he wasn't as much of the face of the company?
No, I think Steven handled that transition really well. He
Oh,
just
great.
basically said, "Hey, Vince, this is kind of." He talked to Lewis and I. He said, "This is kind of beyond me. You guys, I." He understood that he was more risk adverse, and that if some of the ways that he wanted things to go in the beginning, and Lewis and I had the influence to kind of alter
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
direction, paid off in the end. And that came from our experience
Yeah.
running another business. And I think Steven's smart enough to know, and he kind of stepped back. Now he still occasionally he does goes out and meets with lawyers and things like
No,
that,
good.
and we'll talk to clerks of court. He still does that and steps in and is very gracious with his time in
Okay.
doing that. So it's not like he, he tossed him aside and he went someplace else or anything
Yeah.
like that, or he just said, "I'm done," or "I don't want to do this anymore." I think he just realized that there was a different level of understanding of how business needed to go and some of the bets and the
Yeah.
risks and the things he needed to
Yeah.
take. And he said, "Hey, it's time for me to kind of move into this role and do it." And
Yeah.
and he's done a great job with that.
Well, I'm just thinking about that. Sometimes as companies grow, some founders want to go to the next level, do the work and make the change and so forth. Other people don't. There's almost like talking founders app, to
Yeah,
mediate between, founders, and that can be very difficult as companies grow. Growth is not easy. It actually
it's not.
is quite challenging, and it never stops here. And speaking about continued change, we're in the phase of AI affecting our products, our competition, how we operate inside the business, our business models, and so forth. Has AI helped or influenced? Is it a threat and an opportunity so far in your business this year, 2025?
I think it's an opportunity. I will tell you that we're, using some more AI tools based in the business. One of the things that we do here is that we don't do anything sort of half-assed.
Yeah.
We're very deliberate about what we do. So, we engaged with another one of my former professors from Notre Dame. He
Ah.
has a really good consulting business called CRA, and they're some leaders in AI. They actually have
Ah.
a product called Alex, which is their virtual AI assistant. And we went to Alan and said, "Hey, Alan, we need some help with this." And they've been advising McKinsey and some others. And, he helped us develop an AI policy internal with the use of our tools. And we've
Mhm.
we've done that, put that in place to try to put some guardrails on how we do it. Because, protecting customer privacy and,
Yeah.
having a plan in the way you do it. So we've been very deliberate about that. With the application itself, with Talking Parents, we know that we want to use AI in Talking Parents, and we're working on some things right now that would add value to our customers in allowing them to do those communications more effectively, better, and
Mhm.
helping them with coaching with respect to
There you
that.
go. Yeah.
And so we are in the process of working on those things right now and bring them in. So it's an opportunity to add additional value to our customers. I don't I'll just tell you, I don't buy this nonsense that it's going to replace developers and code will be written automatic by AI. Skynet's not coming. I don't believe that. I think what it will do is it will enhance development. I think it will make us be able to be faster if the tools are used right and done right. And in terms of applications, I don't see it as a threat to replace us in any way, shape, or form, but I do see it as a way to augment and enhance the experience for our customers and make it better for our customers. But we need to be very smart because these are very private conversations between two people, right? There's children involved, there's financial information, those types of things. So we're being very deliberate in how we do this and how we implement AI. One of the problems that happens with founders and with people in the technology business, it's the shiny new penny, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
everybody wants to go chase. And you get
Mhm.
the hype cycle and how do you take it and harness it? And, you don't want to be in the trial of disillusionment,
Yeah.
in the end, if wondering, why did I spend all this money for no return? So, we're like everything that we do here, it's not that we're not risk adverse. We're being very deliberate in how
Yeah.
we do it.
Yeah, that's right. And practical, you might say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and looking at industry trends and what's going on, some of our customers are doing things. We've had some things that have popped up on the market that people are trying to
Yeah.
get in on, and I look at some of them and I evaluate them from a different perspective now, right? Because
Yeah.
I do have 500,000 customers using this system, and I do have court systems that rely on us doing this, and so you know the decisions that I make have an impact on that community, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, protecting their privacy, understanding how we share data. Do we anonymize the data so that we can provide good conversation back? Those types of things.
Yeah.
Do we use a large language model or do we use our own custom language Those are
Mhm.
all important things for us
Yeah.
to consider as we make this journey forward.
And I'm sure now as the business leader, CEO, but your experience on the technical side, you can, right, connect the dots on some of these things and as the
Yeah,
technology
that is
changes.
I tell you, I'm not saying you have to be a software engineer to be a SaaS founder or startup, but it certainly helps because
Yeah.
and if you don't, what I would tell people out there, get good mentors that really know their stuff, not people that are hyped up, you know,
Yeah.
really do your research and know who you've got by your side there with you. We've been successful because we've had good mentors along the way. We've been smart about who we've engaged with and who we've surrounded ourselves with. And that has made a huge difference. When
Awesome.
do I outsource versus when do I try to do it myself? That's a normal business
Yes.
thing, but it's even more so, I think, in SaaS.
Yeah. Very tricky. Well, Vince, what an amazing story and creating
Well, thank
a
you.
lot of positive impact in the world for, these challenging situations where, kids need to thrive and have an advantage in a disadvantaged situation. And you guys are making a lot of impact there and creating a very valuable business, headed towards 20 million and, doing it your way in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Vince, when you talk to founders that you're meeting, you were building products, you know, thinking about growing something. What is the most common advice that you give them as they're, getting on the field and figuring things out, whether it's a technical founder or a non-technical founder?
Well, it kind of varies to what they talk about. Some of the things that I tell people is to pay particular attention to monetization and the unit economics.
Yes.
One of the things with people that build SaaS applications or build applications, they want to bolt on a lot of other people's stuff, right? But, you got to pay those people for that stuff, and that stuff affects your unit economics, right? And that in turn affects your pricing. And so being very in tune to that along with your customer, I tell people to be radically focused on the customer, especially in B2C, but I
Hmm.
would say it's true in B2B as
Yeah.
well, because those are the people that are giving you their hard-earned money to do something. And that's not to say that everything that the customer wants is always right. You hear Steve Jobs talk about, delighting the customer with something they don't know that they want, right? You've got to be looking for those things too. So, but I would say my biggest thing is about paying attention to the unit economics and to monetize and being radically focused on the customer. The other thing is that don't own a hobby. You know, no, it's okay if you want to own a hobby. That's fine. If you want a lifestyle business, that type of thing. But if you want to build a real business, you've got to build systems and processes and put them in place to make something of transferable value. Everybody hears about the VC funding and everybody hears about, private equity and this amount of money or whatever. Those guys, VC, that's one thing they bet on 10,
Yeah.
and they know they're going to get one. Private equity wants a more evolved company, in my opinion. They
Hmm.
want more structured. They want to know that you've got systems and processes in place. And, some of the things that you ignore when you're younger become problematic later on, and you
Yeah.
eventually have to deal with them. So be aware of what those things are. The last thing I always tell people is, again, have good mentors. Get out
Mm.
there and ask the questions and be a learner, right? You know,
Yeah.
you don't have to do this alone. Being a founder is lonely.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the number of times that Lewis or Steve and I have sat back when we thought, oh my God, we're not going to make payroll. That's a reality,
Yeah.
right? I don't, I'm going to have to take money that costs me a lot of money in order to keep things going, right? That's a cost of doing business. Making that evaluation calculated and that you're going to get the return on it and making sure that you're not just betting the farm on something that, you're not going to get a return on. Those are all things that matter. You've got to be gritty. You got to be smart.
Yeah. And very practical story here. And you built a very valuable business. Vince, I appreciate you telling the story of talking parents and Bit
Absolutely.
Wizards here on the Practical Founders podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching this week's interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly in-depth interviews with serious software founders who are building valuable software companies without big funding. You can check out my blog, all the podcast episodes, and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com. Or message me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. See you next week.